Essentials of anatomy and physiology. The human body is a precisely structured container of chemicals and chemical reactions. Have you ever thought of yourself in this way? Probably not. And yet, in a strictly physical sense, that is what each of us is. The body consists of trillions of atoms in a specific arrangement, the chemicals, and thousands of chemical reactions proceeding in a very orderly manner. That literally describes us, and yet it is clearly not the whole story. The keys to understanding human consciousness and self awareness are still beyond our grasp. We do not yet know what enables us to study ourselves. No other animals do, as far as we know, but we have accumulated a great deal of knowledge about what we are made of and how it all works. Some of this knowledge makes up the course you are about to take, a course in basic human anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is the study of the body structure, which includes size, shape, composition, and perhaps even coloration. Physiology is the study of how the body functions. The physiology of red blood cells, for example, includes what these cells do, how they do it, and how this is related to the functioning of the rest of the body. Physiology is directly related to anatomy. For example, red blood cells contain the mineral iron and molecules of the protein called hemoglobin. This is an aspect of their anatomy. The presence of iron enables red blood cells to carry oxygen, which is their function. As cells in the body must receive oxygen in order to function properly, so the physiology of red blood cells is essential to the physiology of the body as a whole. Pathophysiology is the study of disorders of functioning, and a knowledge of normal physiology makes such disorders easier to understand. For example, you are probably familiar with the disorder called iron deficiency, anemia. With insufficient iron in the diet, there is not enough iron in the hemoglobin of red blood cells, and hence less oxygen is transported throughout the body, resulting in the symptoms of the iron deficiency disorder. This example shows the relationship among anatomy, physiology, and pathophysiology. The purpose of this text is to enable you to gain an understanding of anatomy and physiology with an emphasis on normal structure and function. Many examples of pathophysiology have been included, however, to illustrate the relationship of disease to normal physiology and to describe some of the procedures used in the diagnosis of disease. Many of the examples are clinical applications that will help you begin to apply what you have learned. Your knowledge of anatomy and physiology will become the basis for your further study in the health professions. Levels of organization. The human body is organized into structural and functional levels of increasing complexity. Each higher level incorporates the structures and functions of the previous level, as you will see. We will begin with the simplest level, which is the chemical level, and proceed to cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. All of the levels of organization are depicted in Figure 1.1. Chemicals. Recall that the body is a container of chemicals. The chemicals that make up the body may be divided into two major categories, inorganic and organic. Inorganic chemicals are usually simple molecules made up of one or two elements other than carbon, with a few exceptions. Examples of inorganic chemicals are water, H2O, oxygen, O2, and one of the exceptions, carbon dioxide, CO2, and minerals such as iron, Fe, and hemoglobin, sodium, Na, in the salt sodium, chloride that makes tears salty, and calcium, Ca, in the calcium salts that make bones hard. Organic chemicals are often very complex and always contain the element carbon and hydrogen. In the category of organic chemicals that are of great importance to human structure and function are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. The chemical organization of the body is the subject of Chapter 2. Cells. The smallest living units in structure and functions are cells, and the human body consists of more than 200 different types of cells. Another way to think of the body is as a city of cells. Just as a large city has millions of people with many different jobs, the body contains an estimated 37 trillion cells that perform more than 200 jobs. Despite these different functions, human cells have certain structural similarities. Each type of cell is made up of chemicals and carries out specific chemical reactions. Cell structure and function are discussed in Chapter 3. Tissues. A tissue is a group of cells that with A tissue is a group of cells with similar structure and function. Just as in a city, certain groups of individuals work together in the fire department, for example, to keep the city functioning. Group of similar cells work together in the body. There are four groups of tissues. Epithelial tissues cover or line body surfaces. Some are capable of producing secretions with specific functions. The outer layer of the skin and sweat glands are examples of epithelial tissues. Internal epithelial tissue include the walls of capillaries, squamous epithelium, and the kidney tubules, in parentheses, cuboidal epithelium, close parentheses, as shown in figure 1.1. Connective tissues connect and support parts of the body. Some transport or store materials. Blood, bone, cartilage, and adipose tissue are examples of this group. Muscle tissues are specialized for contraction, which brings about movement. Our skeletal muscles and the heart are examples of muscle tissue. In figure 1.1, you see smooth muscle tissue, which is found in organs such as the urinary bladder and stomach. Nerve tissues are specialized to generate and transmit electrochemical impulses that regulate body functions. The brain and the optic nerves are examples of nerve tissue. The types of tissues in these four groups, as well as their specific functions, are the subject of Chapter 4. Organs. An organ is a group of tissues precisely arranged as so to accomplish specific functions. Examples of organs are the kidneys, individual bones, the liver, the lungs, and the stomach. The kidneys contain several kinds of epithelial or surface tissues for their work of absorption. The stomach is lined with epithelial tissue that secretes gastric juice for digestion, especially of proteins. Smooth muscle tissue in the wall of the stomach contract to mix food with gastric juice and propel it to the small intestine. Nerve tissue carries impulses that increase or decrease the contraction of the stomach. An organ may be considered a cooperation of tissues in which the whole is the anatomic sum of its parts and much more than the physiological sum. None of the tissues of the kidney can remove waste products from the blood by itself, but the functioning of all of the kidney tissue does so similarly. None of the tissues of the stomach can by itself begin the digestion of protein, but the stomach as a whole can. See box 1.1, replacing tissues and organs. Organ systems. An organ system is a group of organs that all contribute to a particular function. Examples are the urinary system, the digestive system, and the respiratory system. In figure 1.1, you see the urinary system, which consists of the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. These organs all contribute to the formation and elimination of urine. As a starting point, Table 1.1 lists the organ systems of the human body with their general functions and some representative organs. Notice that some organs are part of two organ systems. The pancreas, for example, is both a digestive organ and an endocrine organ. And the ovaries and testes are part of both the endocrine and reproductive system. Figure 1.2 depicts all of the organ systems, and many of these and their functions are already familiar to you. Note, Table 1.1 is the first of many tables in this book. Some tables are summaries of what has been presented in the text, and others use a list format to provide information that has not been written in paragraph form. Table 1.1 is a combination. Concise functions as a summary of the organ systems and in list form to make it all easier to read. When you read this table carefully, you can begin or continue to imagine all of the connections among the body systems. Everything is connected. And this table is also a simple preview of the remainder of the book. All of the systems make up an individual person, and all of them function together. That is, they are interdependent. For now, a few examples will give you an idea of many interactions among the systems. All cells in the body require oxygen. The respiratory system obtains oxygen from the atmosphere, and the circulatory system distributes the oxygen. All cells need nutrients. The digestive system gets the nutrients, and the circulatory system distributes them. All cells produce waste products. The circulatory system collects the waste products, and the urinary system eliminates them from the blood. As mentioned, the remainder of this text discusses each system and its interactions with other systems in more detail. The rest of us, the human microbiome. There's more to us. Yes, there is quite a lot more. Although each of us, every human being, is a unique individual, each of us is also a home, a microbiome to an enormous population of bacteria and other microorganisms, collectively called microbiota. Researchers have lowered their estimates of the number of microbes that reside on us or inside us, with the most of the intestines, but still suggest that they outnumber our own cells by about 2 to 1. An older name for this population is normal flora or resident flora. And different people have different proportions of hundreds of species that make us their home. Note, before we go further, just a suggestion. If your previous science courses have not included much about microbiology, you might like to take a few minutes and read just the first 2 pages of text in chapter 22. This is a brief introduction, but you may find it helpful. Each site on or inside the body has microorganisms. It's also considered a microbiome, an ecosystem for microbes. The word biome comes from the science of ecology. Our planet Earth has many different types of terrestrial environments, each of which is a biome. Examples are deserts, tropical rainforests, temperate zone forests, tundra, prairies, and so on. Each environment has a characteristic population of plants. This population, whether a few of many species, is also known as a biome. This may seem confusing at first, but it simply means that the term biome may be used for the population of a particular environment or the environment itself. The same is true for microbiomes. Thus, the cutaneous microbiome means the population of microbes that live on the skin or the skin itself as the habitat for such a population, or both. It is perhaps simplest to consider a microbiome both. Human microbiomes population in place include the skin surface, the oral cavity, the vagina in women, and in the small intestine. All of these microbiomes are technically outside of the body. The surface of the skin is obviously on the outside, but the others, question mark. Notice the location just mentioned. Each is part of an organ that opens to the environment. Whatever is in the cavity of such an organ system is considered to be outside the body. Food in the small intestine, for example, is outside the body, and only when nutrients are absorbed by the cells lining the intestine and into the blood or lymph are they considered to have come inside. Why include microorganisms in our body? in our study of the human body. We do so because many of their activities are related to human physiology. The science of biology has a term for this sort of relationship between or among different species. Symbiosis literally means together life. In many symbiotic relationships, all of these species involved become in sort in some way also called mutualism. And if one species harms another, the relationship is parasitic. Our microbiota benefit because we give them a home, and internally a home with a splendid climate control system to keep it warm, and we supply them with food. We also receive benefits. For example, we have known for years that some intestinal bacteria produce vitamins that we absorb, especially vitamin K, that is essential for blood clotting. We have also known that these bacteria in their usual body site, true for every microbiome, helps to prevent growth of pathogens. This knowledge is being used to try to help those with antibiotic resistant Clostridium difficile intestinal infection. And some people have been cured by fecal implants or fecal transplants in capsule form of intestinal bacteria from a healthy family member. Ongoing research suggests that by fermenting the food residues that we do not digest, often the complex carbohydrates of plants, a group of chemicals we call fiber, the intestinal bacteria help nourish the epithelial cells that form the intestinal lining. Not only does this keep the lining intact and prevent leakage of intestinal content onto the tissues of the body, but it also helps suppress inflammation, which is triggered by damage and in excess can be even more damaging. Other researchers propose that some of our microbiota help the immune system to establish itself and contribute to the ability of our white blood cells to distinguish between the self-development of allergies, mistaken immune responses, and their potentially serious consequences such as asthma. Still, other studies are investigating the contribution some microbiota may make to weight loss or gain. This all seems to be good. In parentheses, many researchers even refer to beneficial species as the good bacteria, close parentheses, but is not the whole story. The presence of our microbiota has drawbacks as well. Just as any town or city has scoundrels and villains, so too do our microbiomes. Although our good microbes do help limit the growth of pathogens, these disease-causing species have also adapted quite well to life with us. Often they are not present in great numbers, but they can reproduce very rapidly if conditions change, especially a decrease in the population or proportions of our beneficial species. These potential pathogens may be called opportunists in that they can take advantage of change in their environment. Another important consideration is that bacteria produce the chemicals they require for themselves. Many of these are the bacteria equivalent of digestive enzymes and growth factors. Some of these chemicals are outright toxins for us, as with several staphylococcus and streptococcus species of bacteria. And even if not toxic or not that we know of just yet, cannot be considered beneficial to humans. Some, if absorbed, may be harmful, as if one made from a chemical called carnitine found in red meat such as beef that may contribute to heart disease. A common bacterial waste product is ammonia, and when absorbed into circulation, it has the potential to cause brain damage. Fortunately, circulation from the intestine carries ammonia directly to the liver. Liver cells convert ammonia to the less toxic molecule urea or molecule urea. As with all cellular products, including our own, production is genetic. The total number of genes of all of our bacteria is estimated to be several million. In comparison, the genes of a human cell total about 22,000. Most of the bacterial products of these genes have yet to be discovered, and much more work remains to be done, especially with our resident viruses and fungi. Before we truly understand the complex relationship we have with our microbiota, we have much to learn. In the appropriate organ system, chapters that follow, other human microbiomes will be discussed in a little more detail. Takeaways. 1. What is the first living level of organization, and what is a group of these called? 2. What or where is a microbiome? 3. You have to stay alive for the next 10 minutes under strange circumstances. Your nervous system is working and you can have only two other organ systems fully functional. Name the two you want and explain why. Metabolism and homeostasis. Metabolism is a collective noun. It is all of the chemical reactions and physical processes that take place within the body. Metabolism includes growing, repairing, reacting, and reproducing, all the characteristics of life. The pumping of the heart, the digestion of food in the stomach, the diffusion of gases in the lungs and tissues, and the production of energy in each cell of the body are just a few of the thousands of aspects of metabolism. Metabolism comes from a Greek word meaning change, and the body is always changing in visible ways. Walking down the street in microscopic ways, cells dividing in the skin to produce new epidermis, and in submicroscopic or molecular ways, RNA and enzymes constructing new proteins. A related concept, metabolic rate, is most often used to mean the speed at which the body produces energy and heat, or put another way, energy production per unit of time, such as 24 hours. Metabolic rate, therefore, is one aspect of metabolism. A person who is in good health may be said to be in a state of homeostasis. Good health is a product of normal metabolism, and homeostasis reflects the ability of the body to maintain a relatively stable metabolism and to function normally despite many constant changes. The changes that are a part of normal metabolism may be internal or external, and the body must respond appropriately. Eating breakfast, for example, brings out an internal change. Suddenly there is food in the stomach and something must be done with it. What happens? The food is digested or broken down into simple chemicals that the body can use. The protein in the hard-boiled egg is digested into amino acids and its basic chemical building blocks. These amino acids can then be absorbed and used by the cells of the body to produce their own specialized proteins. An example of an external change is a rise in environmental temperature. On a hot day, the body temperature would also tend to rise. However, body temperature must be kept within its normal range of about 97 degrees to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. To support normal functioning, what happens? One of the body responses to external temperature rise is to increase sweating, so the excess body heat can be lost by the evaporation of sweat on the surface of the skin. This response, however, may bring about an undesirable internal change. Dehydration. What happens? As body water decreases, we feel the sensation of thirst, and we drink fluids to replace the water lost in sweating. Notice that when certain body responses occur, they reverse the event that triggered them. In the preceding example, a rising body temperature stimulates increased sweating, which lowers body temperature, which in turn decreases sweating. Unnecessary sweating that would be wasteful of water is prevented. This is an example of a negative feedback mechanism in which the body response reverses the stimulus, in effect turning it off for a while and keeps some aspect of the body metabolism within its normal range. Look at figure 1.3 for another negative feedback mechanism. one in which the hormone thyroxine regulates the metabolic rate of the body. As metabolic rate decreases, the hypothalamus, a part of the brain, and the pituitary gland detects this decrease and secrete hormones to stimulate the thyroid gland on the front of the neck, just below the larynx, to secrete the hormone thyroxine. Thyroxine stimulates the cellular enzyme systems that produce energy from food, which increases the metabolic rate. The rise in energy and heat production is detected by the brain and pituitary gland. They then decrease secretion of their hormones, which in turn inhibits any further secretion of thyroxine until the metabolic rate decreases again. Metabolic rate does rise and fall, but it is kept within normal limits. You may be wondering if there is such a thing as a positive feedback mechanism. There is, but such mechanisms are rare in the body and quite different from negative feedback mechanisms. In a positive feedback mechanism, the response to the stimulus does not stop or reverse the stimulus, but instead keeps the sequence of events going until it is interrupted by some external event. A good example is childbirth, in which the sequence of events simply stated is as follows. Stretching of the ureter cervix stimulates secretion of the hormone oxytocin by the posterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin stimulates contraction of the ureter muscle, which causes more stretching of the cervix as the body is pushed through, which stimulates the secretion of more oxytocin and hence more contractions. The mechanism stops with the delivery of the baby and the placenta. This is the break, the interrupting event. Any positive feedback mechanism requires an external break, something to interrupt it. Blood clotting is such a mechanism, and without external controls, clotting may become a vicious cycle of clotting and more clotting, doing far more harm than good. Inflammation, the body response to damage of any sort, is beneficial and necessary for tissue repair to begin, but the process may evolve into a cycle of damage and more damage, and it requires an external control to stop it. The rise of a fever may also trigger a positive feedback mechanism. Notice in figure 1.3 that bacteria have affected the body's thermostat in the hypothalamus and caused a fever. The rising body temperature increases the metabolic rate, which increases body temperature even more, becoming a cycle. Where is the inhibition? Where is the inhibition? The break. For this infection, the break is white blood cells destroying the bacteria that cause the fever. An interruption from outside the cycle is necessary. It is for this reason, because positive feedback mechanisms have the potential to be self-perpetuating and cause harm, that they are rare in the body. Negative feedback mechanisms, however, contain their own breaks, and that inhibition is a natural part of these cycles, and the body has many such mechanisms. The secretion of most hormones is regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. The regulation of heart and of blood pressure involves several negative feedback mechanisms. The result of all these mechanisms working together is that all aspects of body functioning, that is, of metabolism, are kept within normal limits, is a steady state of equilibrium. This is homeostasis. In the chapters to come, you will find many more examples of homeostasis. As you continue your study of the human body, keep in mind that the proper functioning of each organ and organ system contributes to homeostasis. Keep in mind as well that we will call the normal values of metabolisms are often ranges, not single numbers. Recall that normal body temperature is 97 degrees to 99 Fahrenheit. normal pulse rate. Another example is 60 to 80 beats per minute. A normal respiratory rate is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Variations within the normal range are part of normal metabolism. Takeaways 2. 1. Are there any aspects of human body functioning that are not part of metabolism? If so, give examples. What kind of body process contains its own shutoff or reversal mechanism? 3. What kind of body process may become self-perpetuating and cause harm? Give an example. Terminology and general plan of the body. As part of your course in anatomy and physiology, you will learn many new words and terms. At times, you may feel that you are learning another language, and indeed you are. Each term has a precise meaning, which is understood by everyone else who has learned the language. Mastering the terminology of your profession is essential to communicating effectively with your own coworkers and your future patients. Although the number of new terms may seem a bit overwhelming at first, you will find that using these terms will soon become second nature to you. The terminology presented in this chapter, some of it in tables in list form, will be used throughout the text in the discussion of the organ systems. This will help to reinforce the meanings of new terms and will transform these new words into knowledge. Body parts and areas. Each of the terms listed in Table 1, 2, and shown in Figure 1.4 refers to a specific part or area of the body. For example, the term femoral always refers to the thigh, and brachial always refers to the upper arm. The femoral artery is a blood vessel that passes through the thigh, and the quadriceps femoris is a large muscle group of the thigh. The brachial artery passes through the upper arm, and the biceps brachii and triceps brachii are the major muscles of the upper arm. Another example is pulmonary, a term that always refers to the lungs, as in pulmonary artery, pulmonary edema, and pulmonary embolism. Although you may not know the exact meaning of each of these terms now, you do know that each has something to do with the lungs. Terms of location and position. When describing relative location, the body is always assumed to be in an anatomic position, standing upright facing forward, arms at the side with palms forward, and the feet slightly apart. The terms of location are listed in Table 1.3 with a definition of an example of each. As you read each term, find the body parts used in examples in Figures 1.4 and 1.5. Notice also that these pairs of terms and that each pair is a set of opposites. This will help you recall the terms and their meanings. Body cavities. Body cavities and their membranes. The closed cavities of the body are found in the skull, the vertebral column, and the trunk. Each contains specific organs and membranes. These cavities are the cranial, spinal, thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic, and they are shown in Figure 1.5. The cranial and spinal cavities contain the central nervous system and are completely enclosed by protective bone. These two cavities are continuous, that is, no wall or boundary separates them. The cranial cavity is formed by the skull and contains the brain, the spinal or vertebrae. The spinal or vertebral cavity is formed by the backbone, vertebral column or spine, and contains the spinal cord. The membranes that line these cavities and cover the brain and spinal cord are called the meninges. Thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities. The thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities are within the trunk of the body, and their contents are at least partially protected by bone. The thoracic or chest cavity is the most superior and is separated from the abdominal cavity below by the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a large dome-shaped respiratory muscle. It has openings for the esophagus and for large blood vessels, but otherwise is a wall between the thoracic and abdominal cavities. The pelvic cavity is the most inferior and may be considered a subdivision of the abdominal cavity, in parentheses, there is no wall between the two, close parentheses, or a separate cavity. Organs in the thoracic cavity include the heart and lungs. The membranes of the thoracic cavity are serous membranes called the pleural membranes. The parietal pleura lines the chest wall, and the visceral pleura covers the lungs. The heart has its own set of serous membranes called the pericardial membranes. The parietal pericardium lines the fibrous pericardial sac, and the visceral pericardium covers the heart muscle. Organs in the abdominal cavity include the liver, the stomach, and the intestines. The membranes of the abdominal cavity are the serous membranes called the peritoneum and mesentery. The peritoneum is the membrane that lines the entire abdominal wall, and the mesentery or visceral peritoneum is the continuation of this membrane, folded around and covering the outer surfaces of the abdominal organs. The pelvic cavity is the inferior to the abdominal cavity. Although the peritoneum does not line the pelvic cavity, it covers the free surfaces of several pelvic organs within the pelvic cavity and the urinary bladder and reproductive organs such as the ureter in women and the prostate gland in men. Planes and sections. When internal anatomy is described, the body or an organ is often cut or sectioned in a specific way as to make particular structures easily visible and easily visible. A plane is an imaginary flat surface that separates two portions of the body or an organ. These planes and sections are shown in figure 1.6. Frontal or coronal section. A plane from side to side separates the body into front and back portions. Sagittal section. A plane from front to back separates the body from right and left portions. A mid-sagittal section creates equal right and left halves. Cross section. A plane perpendicular to the long axis of an organ. A cross section of the small intestine, which is a tube, would look like a circle with the cavity of the intestine in the center. Longitudinal section, a plane along the long axis of the organ. A longitudinal section of the intestine is shown in figure 1.6b, and a frontal section of the femur, thigh bone, would also be a longitudinal section. Transverse section. A horizontal plane separates the body or a part into upper and lower portions. Look at part C of figure 1.6. This is a transverse section of the upper abdomen. If you are looking at this picture with the book in front of you or on a screen, the body in the picture is oriented just the way yours is. The anterior or front is at the top of the illustration away from you. Place your right hand at the lower edge of your rib cage. This is where that section is. This is where that section is taken. Notice all the organs at this level and how they fit with one another in the abdominal cavity. Find the aorta. This is the main blood vessel and must be protected. Where is it? Right in front of the backbone, almost in the center of the body, very well protected. Many pictures in later chapters will be sectional views of organs or body parts. Each section are often very helpful in learning the spatial relationship of organs or other kinds of parts to one another. Areas of the abdomen. The abdomen is a large area of the lower trunk of the body. If a patient reported abdominal pain, the physician or nurse will want to know more precisely where the pain was. To determine this, the abdomen can be divided into smaller regions or areas, which are shown in Figure 1.7. Quadrants, a transverse plane and a mid-sagittal plane that cross at the umbilical divide the abdomen into four quadrants. Clinically, this is probably the division used more frequently. The pain of gallstones might then be described as in the upper right quadrant. 9 areas. 2 transverse planes and 2 sagittal planes divide the abdomen into 9 areas. Upper areas. Above lower level of the rib cages are the left hypochondriac, epigastric, and right hypochondriac. Middle areas, the left lumbar, umbilical, and right lumbar. Lower areas, below the level of the top of the pelvic bone, are the left iliac, hypogastric, and right iliac. These divisions are often used in anatomic studies to describe the location of organs. The liver, for example, is located in the epigastric and right hypochondriac areas. Takeaways 3. 1. Which body area is not visible on the posterior side of the body, and where is it? Gluteal, lumbar, pectoral, occipital, scapular. 2. Which body area is not visible on the anterior side of the body, and where is it? Iliac, frontal, sternal, popliteal, brachial. 3. Which organ is not on the mid-sagittal plane of the body? Brain, liver, diaphragm, eye, small intestine. Summary. As you will see, the terminology presented in this chapter is used throughout the text to describe the anatomy of organs and the names of their parts. All organs of the body contribute to homeostasis, the healthy state of the body that is maintained by constant and appropriate responses to internal and external changes. In the chapters that follow, you will find detailed descriptions of the physiology of each organ and organ system and how the metabolism of each is necessary to homeostasis. We will now return to a consideration of the structural organization of the body and to more extensive descriptions of its levels of organization. The first of these, the chemical level, is the subject of the next chapter.